This was the first time something like this happened to me. I'm going to tell you what happened, and you're going to be so surprised when you hear it. Let's get started. My name is Emily. I'm a confident and pretty attractive woman. People usually find me energetic and full of life, and I guess when you combine that with my appearance, it makes me stand out to a lot of people. I'm not exactly sure where to begin, but everything started that night. I was spending the summer at my family's big farmhouse. My mom and dad had gone to the city for a work meeting, so my Uncle Jack was staying with us. I hadn't seen my uncle in years. He had been living in different states for a long time, and he was one of my childhood heroes. Being around him always made me feel safe. That evening, the house was really quiet. My parents' absence created this strange stillness. Uncle Jack had gone to his room early and was already asleep. I was in the living room looking at some old photos on my laptop when my eyes landed on an old chest on the bookshelf. I had never noticed it before. My curiosity got the better of me, so I quietly walked over to it. The lid was heavy, but I managed to open it. Inside there were old letters, a few dusty notebooks, and a strange-looking key. My heart started racing. What door did this key open? At the bottom of the chest, I found a small envelope with a note attached to it. It said, "Some secrets are better left buried." I couldn't believe my eyes. 100 questions were racing through my head. Who wrote this note? Where did the key belong? I closed the chest and took the note and the key to my room. My heart was full of curiosity and a bit of fear, but I was determined to uncover the mystery behind that note. I couldn't sleep all night. I had no idea everything was about to change the next morning. When the first light of morning came, my eyes were still tired. I had spent most of the night thinking about the key and the note from the chest. Maybe it was just an old keepsake or some kind of family joke, but something inside me was telling me this was much more important. When I went downstairs for breakfast, my Uncle Jack was in the kitchen making coffee. He gave me his usual laid-back smile and said good morning. For a second I thought about showing him the key, but I stopped. Something inside me told me not to say anything. Instead I asked, "Have there always been old things like that in this house?" Jack took a sip of his coffee and squinted at me. "This house is full of secrets," he said, almost jokingly. But for a moment his smile seemed to fade. That slight change in his expression only made me more curious. "What kind of secrets?" I pressed. He just shrugged and took his coffee out to the porch. He was trying to drop the subject, but I wasn't about to let it go. I went back to my room for a while and looked at the key again. What kind of story could be hidden behind this small metal key? I decided to go back to the room where I found the chest to check the walls for any hidden compartments or anything unusual. On the wall, I noticed small cracks forming a shape that looked like some kind of panel. My heart started racing. I had found something. Using a screwdriver, I carefully opened what looked like a panel in the wall. Behind it was a small compartment with an old dusty box inside. I used the key to unlock the box and opened the lid. Inside there was an old pocket watch, a photograph, and another note. The photo showed a young man and woman. The man was my Uncle Jack, but who was the woman? I had never heard about him being with anyone. On the back of the photo it said, "Always with you, Lillian." The note was even more mysterious. It said, "I haven't forgotten Lillian, but this secret must stay buried with us." As I stood there trying to make sense of what I was holding, the door to the room suddenly opened. Jack was standing there. His face had a much harsher expression than usual. "Emily, where did you find that box?" he asked, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard before. "Why didn't you tell me? Who is this woman, Jack?" "Who is Lillian?" I asked, trying to defend myself. But Jack suddenly seemed angry. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said. But then, for a moment, his anger turned into deep sadness. "I'll explain everything to you, but not now. All you need to know is this. Don't ever lose that key." Jack left the room, leaving me in a whirlwind of questions and confusion. As soon as he left, the complicated feelings in my heart turned into an even deeper curiosity. No matter what, I wasn't going to let this go. I felt like finding that box wasn't a coincidence. I had to find out who Lillian was. I carefully put the photo into my bag and hid the box back where I found it. At dinner, Jack acted as calm as usual, but when our eyes met, I could sense a tension behind the relaxed mask he was wearing. That's when I got an idea. Instead of asking him direct questions, I could approach it more subtly. "Uncle, I found some old photos. How much do you know about the history of this house?" I asked in an innocent tone. Jack paused for a moment, his eyebrow slightly raised, and it looked like he was about to say something. But then he just said, "This house is full of deep family stories. You already know as much as you need to," and he changed the subject. That answer didn't satisfy me. It was obvious Jack was hiding something. So I decided to investigate on my own. Late at night, after Jack went to his room, I quietly approached the locked drawer he always kept shut with his key. I carefully picked the lock and found a stack of old letters and a journal inside. I quickly started flipping through the journal. The handwriting was Jack's. The first few pages described an ordinary life story. But after a few pages, everything changed. Jack was writing about a deep love he had with a woman named Lillian. He described how their love disrupted not only the balance in the family, but also Lillian's own life. On one of the last pages it said, "Lillian is gone. With her departure, a piece of me died too. But no one can know why she left. If they do, this house and our family will be cursed forever." My hands were trembling. Who was Lillian, and why didn't Jack even want to speak her name? Just as I was closing the journal, I froze at the sound of a creak in the room. Jack was standing in the doorway. His face was filled with anger, but there was also a kind of helplessness in his eyes. He saw me holding the journal. "Emily, you need to leave this place now," he said quietly but firmly. "Whatever you found, leave it where you found it. This secret goes to the grave with me." But I didn't stop. "Uncle, this secret affects me too. Who was Lillian? Why does she matter so much?" I asked, refusing to back down. Jack took a deep breath. "Fine," he said, like he had given up. "But what I'm about to tell you can't leave this room. Lillian was the woman I loved when I was young, but our story wasn't just about love. Lillian discovered something that this family has been protecting for generations, and that secret ended her life." The emotions on Jack's face made it seem like the memories he had buried were all rising to the surface. His voice trembled as he continued. "Lillian had to make a choice, but that choice tore her away from me. Since that day, I've lived to protect this secret." As he spoke, I could feel the deep pain in every word he said. Seeing him so vulnerable shocked me. Jack had always been strong, determined, and guarded about his feelings. But the man standing in front of me now had completely let his mask down. "Jack," I whispered softly, "why are you carrying this secret all by yourself? It's destroying you." He took a deep breath and stepped closer to me. His eyes were locked onto mine. "Some burdens can't be shared, Emily. This secret is mine to bear alone." But I couldn't let him face this loneliness. I took a step closer. "No one has to be alone," I said, my voice answering the sadness in his eyes. In that moment, the air between us shifted. The silence grew heavy, as if words were no longer enough. The hard expression on Jack's face softened into something more complicated. Without realizing it, I had clenched my hands tightly together, but he gently reached for them. His touch was surprisingly tender. "Emily," he murmured, but didn't finish the sentence. I moved a little closer. A wave of emotion rose inside me, a mix of curiosity and an unexplainable pull. My heart was pounding as I watched every expression on his face. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers gently wrapping around mine. I felt our gaze deepen. This moment was both comforting and filled with complexity. When I realized he had stepped even closer, the space between us disappeared completely. But this closeness wasn't just physical. It was as if years of emotional weight were silently shared in that instant. Jack took a deep breath and stepped back. "This isn't right," he said, his voice low but firm. "I can't put you in danger. Everything with Lillian, it ruined other people's lives." But I didn't back down. "Jack, no matter what happens, I won't let you be alone. If this secret affects my life, then we need to face it together." In that moment, I understood that the bond between us wasn't just about secrets. It was woven from the deepest vulnerabilities of being human. Jack took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, as if he was fighting an inner battle. But then he stepped closer to me, and the tension on his face melted into a gentle expression. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper and fragile. "I don't want anything about tonight to feel wrong, but sometimes what's right or wrong matters less than resisting what we feel." In that moment, I felt the space between us completely disappear. When my hands rested on his shoulder, it was as if I had found a long-lost piece of myself. Jack's fingertips brushed lightly against the side of my face, not to explain, but to express the turmoil he was feeling. Time seemed to stand still. Our breathing blended into a quiet but intense rhythm. Jack seemed to pull back for a moment, but then, caught in the shadow of his doubts, he looked at me more closely. "We should make tonight unforgettable, but nothing about it should turn into regret by morning," he said, his voice steady yet full of emotion. The bond between us had deepened beyond what words could express. In his touch, there was a sense of trust and closeness that words could never convey. This wasn't just about sharing the weight of the past, but about building a moment shaped by our faith in each other. Jack's fingers slowly moved from my hands to my shoulders. His touch was not only gentle but protective. I felt myself surrounded by the emotional space he carefully created, like a quiet breeze, soft but unstoppable. Hours seemed to dissolve into the depth of what we felt. Our connection transcended physical closeness, becoming a profound spiritual unity. The silence between us was no longer empty. It became a melody of shared understanding. That night, I stepped beyond the walls where Jack kept his secrets. I felt like I was not only sharing his fears but also his dreams and pain. His emotional vulnerability brought me closer to him, making the bond we shared even more unbreakable. Jack's hands lingered on my shoulders for a moment. The conflict on his face revealed both a sense of relief, as if he wanted to believe being close to me was the right choice, and a tangle of self-doubt questioning every step he took. "Emily, I need to protect you," he said, his voice carrying a mix of resolve and quiet surrender. But his eyes spoke more than his words ever could. As his fingertips gently moved from my shoulders down to my arms, a wave of warmth rippled through me. His touch wasn't just an expression of closeness, but also a silent reassurance. In that moment, it felt like the world had gone quiet, leaving only Jack and me. "Jack," I said, my gaze locked on his, "you've been hiding so much to protect yourself, but maybe some secrets feel less frightening when they're shared." Jack didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in slowly, his hand resting softly against my cheek. In his touch, I felt not just attraction, but also a deep sense of regret. The sadness in his eyes was the mark of burdens he had carried for years. Yet that sadness was beginning to give way to quiet acceptance. I leaned closer to him, the space between us shrinking with each passing second. I could feel his breath on my face. But the magic of this moment wasn't just in physical proximity. It was a reflection of the trust we had in each other and our willingness to share the weight of our secrets. Jack's hand slid gently down my back as he pulled me closer. My heart raced, and I realized he felt the same intensity. Without thinking, my hands moved to his chest. This simple motion felt like a confession, a silent acknowledgement that there was no turning back for us now. For hours we were lost in this closeness. But it wasn't just physical. It was a moment where our souls seemed to find a shared language. Every touch and every look lightened the burdens of our past, even if only a little. As Jack leaned toward me, he whispered, "Emily, this bond we share, it reminds me of something I'd forgotten. What it means to truly trust." The depth in his gaze reassured me once more that I was exactly where I was meant to be. That night, I managed to move past Jack's protective walls. But I also began to understand why he clung so tightly to his secrets. Jack's embrace felt like he was letting go of all the emotions he had been holding inside for years. I could sense that in that moment, I was helping him lighten the invisible burdens he carried on his shoulders. My heartbeat quickened in sync with his breathing. As his fingers gently moved across my back, every touch drew me closer to him. The purity and intensity of this moment seemed to transcend time. My hands moved slowly from his chest to his shoulders, and the warmth of his skin filled me with a deep sense of trust. Jack gently cupped my face with both hands. When his eyes locked onto mine, the silence between us said everything. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling yet full of determination. "What we shared tonight isn't just an escape. It's something I haven't felt in years. A sense of hope." His words touched my heart. I moved closer to him and placed my hands on his face, whispering, "Jack, you're not alone, and I won't let these secrets consume you." After I said that, I felt the distance between us completely dissolve. Jack leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. That small but powerful gesture spoke volumes about what we were both feeling in that instant. As his breath brushed against my face, I could sense the rhythm of his heartbeat. My hands slid gently from his shoulders to his neck, and Jack placed his hands firmly on my waist. These movements, though silent, expressed everything we couldn't put into words. It wasn't just physical closeness, it was a profound connection. As time passed, the magic of the moment grew even stronger. Jack's hands moved carefully toward my hair, his fingers lightly brushing through it as his eyes stayed fixed on mine. That gaze was an expression of trust and surrender. "Emily, I'll never forget how much this moment means," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "But tonight is just the beginning. I need to tell you everything. Lillian's secrets are both a threat to us and a key to the answers we need." Hearing those words stirred a wave of curiosity within me. The trust Jack had in me was deep enough for him to reveal the secrets he had guarded for so long. Yet I couldn't help but wonder how the magnitude of those secrets would change both of our lives forever. Jack took a deep breath and closed his eyes as he continued. "Emily, Lillian's secret doesn't just threaten my life. It could ruin others too. But I can't keep it hidden any longer." His voice felt like a door creaking open after being locked for years. I gently touched his shoulder, trying to reassure him. "Jack, no matter what, I'm here. You can tell me everything," I said softly. He stayed silent for a few seconds, his eyes fixed on a distant point as if a storm was raging inside his mind. Then he began to speak quietly. "Lillian wasn't just a love story, she was a danger. The choices she made that night, the ones that changed her life, were because of a threat. A letter." I looked at him in surprise. "A threat letter? From who? Why?" I asked. His eyes reflected a mix of fear and anger. "Someone needed the information Lillian had. It wasn't just personal, it was big enough to shake an entire community, not just one family, but she chose to keep it hidden, and she paid the price for it." His words sent a chill through me. Jack's voice grew heavier, as though he was reliving the weight of it all. "Lillian wasn't just a woman. She was a keeper of secrets. She knew the darkest truths about my family. But that knowledge made her a target. In that moment, I began to understand why Jack had stayed silent for so long. His face bore the marks of a battle he'd been fighting for years. I stepped closer to him, placing my hands gently over his. "Jack, this secret is tearing you apart, but you're not alone. We can carry this together," I said firmly. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and gratitude. "Emily, this path might be dangerous, but sharing this moment with you, it makes it all feel a little less terrifying," he said. The bond between us wasn't just a show of support. It felt like a promise. The trust we had in each other gave us the strength to confront the darkness of these secrets. That night, as Jack shared everything with me, I knew our lives would never be the same. But the trust he placed in me to share those secrets showed just how strong the connection between us had become. That night, Jack's words echoed in my mind. A threat letter, a secret, and a woman whose life had been completely altered because of it. As I tried to piece everything together, a mix of curiosity and unease grew within me. "Jack, what exactly was Lillian's secret? How could it be so dangerous?" I asked. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes seeming to drift back into the shadows of the past. "The secret was tied to my family's business connections," he said. "Lillian uncovered one of their illegal deals. But instead of exposing it, she kept it hidden, thinking she might use it someday. There were people who knew she had this information, Emily, and those people wanted her silenced." His words left me stunned. "So Lillian became a target because she didn't reveal their secret?" I asked. Jack nodded. "Yes. But it's more than that. That secret kept her safe. The people who wanted her dead didn't know where the information was. What threatened them wasn't just Lillian, but what someone else could do with that knowledge." In that moment, I understood the weight Jack had been carrying. Keeping this secret wasn't just endangering his life, it was a constant shadow over him. "Jack, what about you? What happens if they find out you know this secret?" I asked, unable to hide the worry in my voice. Jack looked at me, his gaze filled with determination. "Emily, I've lived with this for as long as I could, but I can't carry it anymore. Sharing it with you feels like the only way to free myself, even if just a little." For a moment, silence settled between us. It was a silence heavy with the realization of how dangerous this truth really was. Yet, even in that quiet, I could feel the bond between us growing stronger with every passing second. Breaking the silence, Jack reached for my hand. "Emily, once I share this secret, there's no going back. But it won't just affect me. It could change your life too," he said. I stepped closer and placed my hands over his. "Jack, no matter what, I'm with you. We'll carry this burden together," I said firmly. The gratitude in Jack's eyes deepened the connection between us. "Emily, letting you into my life might be the best decision I've made in years," he said. In that moment, our closeness wasn't just about support. It was an expression of the love and trust we shared. This moment wasn't just about the past. It was a decision that would shape our future. That night, when I left Jack's house, my mind was spinning with everything I had felt and learned. I was no longer just ordinary Emily living a simple life. Jack's secrets had transformed my world too. But the moments I shared with him reminded me that even in fear and darkness, we can find light. The next day, Jack told me his plan. "We need to figure this out, Emily. If we can follow the clues Lillian left behind, we can finally get rid of this burden," he said. I decided to join him on this journey. While tracing the information Lillian had hidden, we had to face the harsh truths that had once threatened her life. It was a dangerous and emotionally draining process, but being by Jack's side gave me strength. For a week, we searched for the documents Lillian had hidden. Finally, we found a file locked in a safety deposit box at a bank. Inside were the papers Lillian had been too afraid to reveal. They exposed the illegal activities of Jack's family. When Jack saw the documents, he took a deep breath. "Emily, when these documents come to light, it won't just bring down my family. It'll collapse a much bigger network," he said. I looked at him and said firmly, "Jack, we have to do the right thing. These secrets don't just imprison you, they can free others too." Jack decided to turn the documents over to the authorities. For him, it was both an ending and a new beginning. That night, as he handed over the files, he turned to me and said, "Emily, I couldn't have found the courage to do this without you." In that moment, I could see that the weight he had carried for so long had finally started to lift. I hugged him and said, "Jack, you're not alone anymore. No matter how things change, We're in this together. With the documents delivered, Jack's family's dark past came to light. It affected many lives, but for Jack and me, it was a story of freedom. The story ends here, but its impact stays with us. If you want to know more about this journey or share your thoughts, subscribe to my channel and drop a comment. Let's connect in the comments.